Well, g'day guys, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Mitch Stocker, and of course, this is Life in the Peloton. The podcast is being powered by MAAP. Life in the Peloton and MAAP have come together to help continue to tell the beautiful story of all facets of cycling, whether that be through the cool kit that MAAP make or the stories we hear at Life in the Peloton. It's a great combination. Well, this week on Life in the Peloton, it's all about sleep, something we do every night. I've gone away and I've spoken to Dr. Ian Dunican, who holds a PhD in sleep and performance from the University of Western Australia, where he worked with elite sporting organizations and athletes to optimize sleep, recovery, and performance. For over 20 years, he has done that. Originally from Ireland, but now living and working in WA. It's a really interesting topic, and we've seen it. Well, I remember when I was leaving the Peloton, there was a big focus around it, but it's gone upwards. We've seen it happen at the Peloton. These guys are concentrating on the one percenters. So I thought, let's hear this, what they're doing in the World Tour, but also how do we bring it back and apply it to our lives today? Lawson Craddock, I also spoke to him at the end of the podcast as well, because he was an ex-teammate of mine at EF, and he's now riding on Jayco Alula. He's riding actually for 11 years professional, but when we were riding together, I noticed because he was a very early adopter of sleep devices, one of the first riders I ever saw, and a rider who actually knows and understands the metrics. So I thought it'd be really cool if we could wrap it up, hear from Ian, get an understanding of sleep in general, but then speak to a guy who uses it in performance to hear how it relates to the World Tour of Cycling. Now, the podcast is also being brought to you by a really special partner, Zwift. I know you guys know who I'm talking about. Back in 2014, Zwift revolutionized cycling by turning indoor cycling into a cycling game. And I remember thinking, I don't need a game to train indoors. I like to be down in a dungeon, bashing it out on an ergo. But the next phase, 2020, COVID pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, I'm forced to do all my training indoors. And I got it. It hit me. Zwift was fun, hard, and yet so addictive. I was on. That was it. I was a Zwifter. And now Zwift Ride is here to take indoor cycling to a new era. It's the first smart bike designed specifically for Zwifting. They've made it more affordable and super simple to set up. There is nothing worse than thinking, you know what, I'm going to do a session. Oh, I've got to go out and get my road bike. I've got to connect it to the smart trainer. By the time you do all that, you're like, don't worry about it. I can't be bothered. That is the best thing about Zwift Ride. You can just leave it there, set up to your smart trainer, ready to rock and roll whenever you feel like jumping on and smashing out a session. It's available in the US, Europe, UK via Zwift.com and Wahoo.com. Get across and check this out, because this is going to change your life when it comes to Zwifting, because you can just jump on and within minutes you're off and away, sweating, trying to keep up in Watopia. Guys, sit back, have a listen to this one. I know you're going to learn something about this, about your sleep hygiene, how you can get more out of it. Maybe you're not going to like some of the things you hear, but I know you're going to need to hear them to have better sleep. I hope you enjoy this. Here we go. Well, we've got a special guest here, Dr. Ian Dunican. He holds a PhD in sleep and performance from the University of WA, and he's worked in elite sport organizations with athletes to optimize sleep, recovery, and performance. Over 20 years of experience, originally from Ireland, but now living over in WA. Ian, welcome to the pod, mate.
Thanks, Mitchell. Thanks for having me on.
How'd you end up over in WA?
Quite weirdly, I always say, well, my wife is Australian. They go, where is she from? And I go, Warrnambool. And they still go, why did you end up in Western Australia? The answer is I came here for a 3 or 4 day stopover to see a friend. Well, my wife's friend. We were coming from South Africa after being backpacking, and our ticket had a Joburg, Perth to Brisbane. We were going to go live in Brisbane because my wife had been living up in northern New South Wales. And we got here, and literally the job section that time was in the middle of the West, and it was like a paper the size of the paper. And I was like, I'm not leaving here. So much work. So We thought we'd stay for a few months and see how it goes. And 20 years later, here we are.
Well, we're going to be talking about sleep, as you heard me say there, and what is happening in pro cycling, and I think in a whole range of sports, but also just in general society, is we're becoming a little bit more in tune to tapping into these little extra things that make us feel better. Let's talk about professional sport or performance, and specifically pro cycling. When I retired a couple of years ago, we were already getting into it. Wearing, sleep devices. We were tracking our sleep device. We were linking it back to our training, looking into making ourselves a better perform, how we could tap into getting to sleep better, sleeping deeper, all this sort of stuff. And now we've seen it in pro cycling go up another notch where these riders are going so good. They're tapping into these 1%ers. I think before we get into the performance stuff, I reckon we need to lay a bit of a ground base here so everyone understands and we can all get on the same level. I just want to start with a real sort of simple question for you. It's just understanding the fundamentals of sleep. Simply, why do we need to sleep every night? What happens to the body when we go to sleep?
Yeah, that's a simple question that I could talk about for a week. I think it's important to come back, Mitch, on what you were saying just at the start of that, leading into that question, because there's two things that's happening, I think, in the last couple of years that's changed. One is that we have seen a significant increase in people's awareness about sleep, and we've seen a lot of messaging around it. We've only really seen an increase in sleep and athletic research since about 2010, so it's still pretty new. And sleep science as a discipline is quite new as well, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the second thing then that we're seeing is societal factors change. You think back, Mitch, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, I don't think we were this busy. People are expected to do way more in their life now. So people are struggling to recover. People are struggling to maintain sort of peak performance. And so they're starting to look at these other parts like sleep and nutrition, mobility, and so on. And particularly as we get older as well, these are the things we need to focus on more. But coming back to your question, what is the purpose of sleep? Well, the simple answer is we actually don't know. We still do not know the one true reason why we sleep. If you look at the history of sleep science as a discipline, you go back to the time of like Aristotle and so on, they hypothesized that, basically after you ate food, maybe it was the vapors from the food that went up through your esophagus and into your brain and made you sleepy. Now, there's some merit to that in terms of timing of day. We saw a lot of various kind of theories being thrown around about sleep. And it wasn't really until probably in the 1900s, I feel old saying that, 1900s, like, we really saw sleep medicine taken off as a discipline. So the stages of sleep like REM and non-REM were not really understood until between like 1929 to like 1960. That's when they came about. And the Academy of Sleep Medicine in America, which we follow as well, only really came around in the 70s and the 80s. But we do know that there is multiple reasons why we sleep. We know it's good for repair and recovery. We know it's good for restoration. We know it enables growth the next day. It's good for memory consolidation. We know that all these different things are happening. So I like to kind of break into two parts. It's updating the software, basically our brain, our memories, and all these type of things for a simplistic way of looking at it. And two, it's updating our hardware as well. So in general, REM sleep, rapid eye movement, is really good for that software. So it's like doing an iOS update on your phone overnight. And then updating the hardware as you get a new phone every 2 or 3 years because there's planned obsolescence in phone. And so it's the same with the non-REM sleep as well. It's really good for repair and recovery.
You sort of mentioning some of the stages there, the different cycles, I guess you call it. How many cycles are there, and break them down, I guess?
You and I right now are awake. Well, I hope we are anyway. And we're in this state of consciousness. We're quite lucid. We can talk to each other. We can, maintain vigilance and so on. But for now anyway, it's pretty early. And then when we go to sleep, we go through different stages. So typically they're called N1, which is stage 1, N1, light sleep. N2, slightly deeper. And then we go into N3. And then we can maybe cycle into REM as well. Now, N1, 2, and 3, they are all stages of non-REM sleep. So they're non-rapid eye movement.
Right.
These are all really important for physical repair and recovery. The light sleep, N1 and 2, you can wake up with them quite easily. So maybe, a cat howling outside, a dog barking, door bang, someone shouting a party, it's going to probably wake you up. N3 is the deepest sleep that we have. And N3 is really important for basically repair and growth for the next day. So this is when growth hormone is released, so testosterone and so on. We typically spend about 20% of our sleep period in this. And then we may oscillate into dreaming sleep as well, which is REM. Now, predominantly dreams happen in REM, but you can have some dreams happen in non-REM phases as well. It's predominantly the key word here. And then REM is very similar to being awake. The only difference is we have muscle atonia. So basically we don't move, because if we could move when we have our dreams, we'd have what's called REM behavior disorder. We'd be running around during our dreams. So we don't want that to happen. And then we may come back up into a full state of consciousness as well. Now, we oscillate in and out of those stages per night. People may have heard that they happen roughly every 90 minutes. That's just been looking at big kind of data from lots of studies pooled. So if you're looking at your sleep and your wake changing in and out of those cycles every 60, 30, 45, don't stress about it. The body will prioritize what it needs each and every night. So people shouldn't get too kind of crazy about it has to be a 90-minute cycle. Because at the end of the day, you can't switch it. You can't be asleep and go, right, jump to REM, jump to this, jump to that. You can't do it. So there's no point in stressing about something you can't control.
There's so many questions coming out of that. I was just like, one thing was going ping, ping. All right, let's just rewind a couple of things. Let's go back to that first phase, the end phase, the light sleep. When you drop into that, typically, look, you mentioned the cycles there, and it sounded like it was chronologically, it sort of went light as you get, a bit more into sleep, then you drop into the next phase you go into REM, and then you slowly come out of it. Is that typically how it works? Or you can actually just drop straight into REM? Or how does the cycles really work, and why they work in those ways?
That's a good question. And what I'm talking about there, probably, Mitchell, is a typical average adult, middle of the road, going to bed and falling asleep at 11, getting up at 7. But like everything, there's exceptions to all those rules. So depending on the sleep you've had in the days before or the weeks before, you may experience what's called REM rebound. So REM rebound is basically when you just go straight asleep and you have crazy amount of dreams for a long period of time. That's REM rebound. Now, that should not be confused with hypnagogic images. So when we start falling asleep, we often start seeing images. That doesn't mean we're jumping straight into REM. We may have these kind of, weird experiences as we're falling asleep, where we start kind of maybe, it's like we're dreaming. And coincidentally, if you look at parapsychology, so people seeing ghosts, it's amazing how many people see ghosts around this time as well, because maybe it's that kind of transition between sleep and wake, or wake and sleep, and they're going in and out. So that's quite normal for people kind of waxing away now at these different stages. So you may go from light, you may just go straight into deep, you may go into REM. It all depends. The body will always prioritize what it needs. You cannot really control this. So whatever the body needs, it's going to do. 2 examples where we see this, probably most pronounced, is people with sleep disorders. There's over 70 recognized sleep disorders. The most prevalent one we would know here in Australia would be obstructive sleep apnea, generally related to weight. So the heavier you are. So if your BMI is over 31, you're a male, and you're over the age of 40, 95% chance you will have OSA. Obstructive sleep apnea, which means you won't be getting enough oxygen overnight and you'll be waking up. So that's one of over 70. People are given therapy for that, such as CPAP, which is basically forced oxygen down, continuous positive airway pressure, forced oxygen down into their airway overnight. They will have these crazy dreams for weeks or months on end, because what they are experiencing is REM rebound from all that sleep deprivation.
Wow.
The other thing as well is people who smoke a lot of pot. Now, so people will talk about, smoking weed's great for sleep, makes me relax on whatever it might be. Marijuana, the THC, will actually suppress REM sleep. And then when you come off weed, you may have crazy dreams for up to 6 months. Hence why some people go, I should start smoking pot again, because when I don't smoke pot, I have these crazy dreams and can't sleep. So that will have massive REM rebound as well. Similarly as well, probably in your area, in endurance, a lot of people may be going straight into deep sleep very quickly because the body needs that repair and recovery. I know myself from years of doing ultra marathons, when I had finished one, sometimes I would just go to sleep and it was like someone put me into an anesthetic. I couldn't remember. I'd be asleep for like 10 or 11 hours and I'd wake up and be like, I cannot remember one thing that happened. It was like the same feeling as anesthetic. So most likely I had predominantly deep sleep in that period.
So from that, I was thinking myself, and here we're jumping ahead, but it doesn't matter. I was thinking that kind of feeling was positive, like going to sleep and just feeling like I was just sunk into the bed and I didn't move. Yeah. I was a rock, like just getting purely deep sleep. Ideally, you don't want just that. You want to have the REM sleep as well, the combination.
Yeah, but it's very hard, Mitchell, for us to go to bed with a plan of what to get. The body will prioritize what it needs. This is the thing. This is the beautiful thing about the body. The body will, the body and the sort of the brain, for want of a better word, will prioritize what sleep that it needs. It's got this great inbuilt algorithm. You don't need to do much about it unless you have a sleep disorder that's been more or less put onto you from, well, I don't know if put onto you is the right word, but OSA is a classic one. So, we're not meant to be that size. Yeah. That's why we can't breathe at nighttime. It's not normal.
So
that's why.
Well, then jumping ahead, then let's talk about the sleep devices. And we're going to get to that later on, but I want to talk about it right now because these sleep devices, look, I'm wearing a Whoop at the moment. I actually just rekindled it up. I hadn't used it since I was racing. I had no real need for it. I didn't think so. Just sort of having a look into it again and just hearing what you're saying then, if we can't sort of control it in a way, because you just said then the body's going to do what it needs to do, why do we need to monitor it? Why do we need to know what we can and can't do if we can't really change it?
Yeah, so there's two things about wearable devices which are key. One is that there's a set of those variables that you can control and a set you can't. The ones that you can control probably have better validity. So in other words, when you wear a Whoop or whatever you're wearing, it will give you measures of the time you fell asleep, the amount of sleep you had, the amount of awakenings you had, the time you got up, and so on. For those derived variables, they are probably roughly about 90% accurate against the gold standard. Not always perfect, but pretty good. The sleep stages, and I don't know the validation. Well, I do know there's been validation on Whoop. I know Dean Miller's done some stuff at CQU, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that the stages of sleep can be out in some of those papers, some of the research, by 200 to 300%. So there's that much variation in them. Right. But your point is exactly right. What can we do about them? So if I'm looking at my sleep, and I always recommend to people, don't be looking at your sleep night to night and freaking out. We call that orthosomnia. And so myself and Matt Riddle have written about this as well in another paper about pajamas, polysomnography, and sleep tracking, where basically people will kind of freak out going, oh, I only got 10 minutes of sleep last night at 4% in REM. Oh, I'm going to die. Like people will freak out, go that end of the spectrum. When you're looking at your sleep data, look at it on a rolling window of 2 to 3 weeks. Look for that and look for least variation and look for consistency. So we want timing of sleep, which is really good. So I go to bed every night at the same time. So it might be 10 p.m. or whatever it might be. I don't really care whether you go to bed at 10 or 2 in the morning. Just once it's consistent for you and you're getting between 7 to 9 hours of sleep, you want to focus on sort of consistency and the timing of that, the quantity of sleep, allowing 7 to 9 hours, and then ensuring the quality of sleep is there as well. And you really want regularity and routine around that sleep. Now, for the sleep stages, so you can control that. The time you go to sleep, the amount of time you get in bed, you can control all those variables. The sleep stages, you can't control them. Now, it is good to look at them on a long term because what they can do is give you some indication. So if you are tracking your sleep and knowing that there is a lot of variability in these devices, if you're constantly getting 9 hours of sleep a night, you're going to bed at 10, you're getting them next morning at like 7, 8, 9, whatever it might be, but you're constantly looking at and you're getting great sleep and you're feeling like crap the next day and you constantly notice that your REM sleep is like 2%. Now we might have some data to go and do something about this and go, right, what's going on here? Why am I not getting enough REM? What's happening? Or conversely, I'm waking up lots throughout the night. On my actigraphy, it's showing like my Whoop device. I've been spending like, an hour and a half awake each night cumulatively. And my REM sleep is constantly fragmented. Then we can look at that and go, very interesting. You're waking up on REM. What happens? Oh, my partner said that I get up and walk around the room. Okay, maybe there's something going on here, like REM behavior disorder. Maybe something else is going on. So it can be these kind of outer stakes, this data points that can tell us over long term what may be going on and what we can chase. And then we can use some more sort of, I would say, scientifically valid diagnostic approaches to get some measures around that to then apply some treatment as well. Remember that all these devices are not medical devices, they're physical activity trackers. So the FDA and the TGA, that's what they're approved for. These are not perfect medical devices. They are there to provide information in general if you start reading the small print. So do not start making life and death decisions based upon these trackers. And if you are, at least look at it on a 3-week window, because waking up in the morning going, I didn't get enough REM sleep, what are you going to do? Tell me what you're going to do next night. You're going to sit there and like bang a nail into your head to get more REM. It's not going to happen. Like there's no action from this. So I think this is the problem with some people. We call it orthosomnia. People start getting obsessed with the sleep measures, and it can be quite, I think, dangerous for some people to get like a little bit loopy about this stuff.
Well, that was exactly the point that I wanted to make. Are they beneficial or do they do more damage than good? Because look, to go back to the pro world and the elite sort of level, when we had these devices and we were on a grand tour, 21 days in a row, you'd be looking at your device in the morning and you already make the decision on what your performance was going to be that day from your sleep score, from what the information was telling you. You're going to be feeling bad today because you didn't have a great sleep. Mentally, that made a switch in my mind. Going to have a bad one today. So I love hearing that. Look, it is a device that can give you some information, but it's not, it's not gospel. It's not, you need to just observe it. And I think the best way I used to do it was put that information away until the end of the day, until I could look at it, or use it in a training scenario where I could actually try and, look at the information and change something. On a race, I couldn't change those things. I think at home we can change things. And when we talk about changing things, what are we talking about? Is it setting up, the way that we get to sleep? Is it changing your environment? What are the things that are going to be able to alter those different cycles? It's a big question. I know there's a lot of different things, but you said in the start of this that there's not a whole lot we can do. Your body is going to jump into what cycle it needs. When we're talking about honing and helping ourselves drop into different, sleep cycles or even get to sleep, what sort of stuff are you talking about?
Yeah, before I talk about that, Mitch, I just want to come back on that point about that, because some people may be experiencing or still doing exactly what you're saying, waking up in the morning, like having a bad night's sleep. This is going to sound quite harsh, but I think that's actually an idiotic way of looking at stuff, because what's going to happen is you're just going to piss yourself off and you're not going to have good training. It's really important for people to know it is okay to have a bad night's sleep. It is not the end of the world. You don't have to be a champion sleeper every night. And I think some of these measures are driving people. We're getting into this world where everybody has to be brilliant. Everybody has to have 6-figure job. Everybody has to have an MBA. Everybody has to be doing triathlon on the weekend. Everybody has to have the best kids. Everybody has
2 hours of REM sleep a night.
Yeah, 2 hours of REM sleep. Play the piano. I do yoga. I lift weights. I do this. I'm working with a child. Calm down.
Yeah.
You can't do everything in a 24-hour period, right? So this is what's happening. It's driving this perfectionism, where people are doing this. And so I think if you wake up and you feel a bit shitty, you want to make that decision. If it's not a race day, maybe have, a different intensity. So I'll often categorize like light, moderate, or high intensity. Okay, I've had a bad night's sleep. It's a bit bad weather. It's winter. I'm not feeling great. Okay, let's do a light session today. Let's cut it down by a certain time. So instead of doing a 2-hour bike ride, maybe I'll just do an hour bike ride. Maybe I'll do it on a stationary bike, and maybe I'll just keep at this cadence or whatever it might be. So I'm doing something like more in the active recovery phase. So I think it's important to note that as well. And the same for coaches as well. This is a problem. Coaches just get used to it, suck it up and push it. Fucking that's stupid. This is silly. If we have the data and we want to be strategic about it, let's use it properly. Also as well, if you've had a bad night's sleep, but the last 3 or 4 nights before that, you've been getting 10, 11-hour sleeps, right? Champion sleeps. On average, you've still been achieving 9 hours. You're good to go. So don't talk yourself down. Maybe you can push it. So, don't talk yourself down the other way either.
On that note then, what advice would you give to guys who are in the middle of a stage race where they can't alter anything, they can't decide to take an easy day, the race rolls on with or without them, they've got to just suck it up and follow the race, and they've woken up, they've seen that data. What's the sort of advice if someone came to you, you were on a race, you're advising guys, hey, look, Ian, this is what's happened today.
Right, this is where I switch, right? And this is where I go. Right. This is a bit like military stuff. It's a bit like when I've done endurance racing myself or martial arts or like long distance stuff. This is where just fucking do it, man. It's not like you're racing every fucking day. Just do it. This is your one chance. Push it. You can fucking sleep after this. That's what I would say to him if I was the coach. Because the thing is, we're not inducing long-term sleep deprivation. We're not inducing, this irregularity of sleep overall. It's okay to go through a period of poor sleep. We see this with fighters. We see it in F1 drivers. We see it in Major League Baseball. We see it in military. Sometimes you just have to grit it and bite down your mouthpiece and just go for it. There is going to be shitty days. And that's what separates people, I think, as well. I'm not saying that sleep isn't important, but it's not like we're going to get someone to do that every single day. It's once or twice, or maybe once in a race, or every once a month or once every 2 weeks. It's not that much, and we can make it up. So we can kind of push through it. So that's what I would say to that person as well. The second thing then I would say is maybe we can use caffeine strategically across that day as well. So we get into caffeine and the impact of caffeine on sleep and performance. So we know that caffeine, the pharmacokinetics caffeine for most people, anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour to peak in the system, about 4 hours of a half-life. So when can we take caffeine across that day to actually help push that performance? So we know then if we start getting into what's called circadian biology or chronobiology, maybe that race, starts at 11 a.m. and it's going to go through till roughly 3 p.m. We know that around like 12:30, 1 o'clock, we're going to get into this little funk, this little dip, this post-lunch dip, regardless of food, this is going to happen. Maybe that's the time we strategically load up caffeine between 12 and 1 to give that person that boost for that last stage of the race. We know that's going to happen. So there's very little around sort of the sleep and nutrition interactions. A lot of it is self-reported and anecdotal. But we do know that the two biggest things that's going to have an impact on somebody is caffeine and alcohol. And we know we can use caffeine strategically during the day and sort of timing it right, not to have a negative impact on sleep at night. And then obviously, I think people are well aware of the deleterious effects of alcohol. It helps you fall asleep, but fragments your sleep across the night as well. Even one glass can do that. So, I'm sure we'll talk about, kind of sleep hygiene and on optimal routines for sleep. And they're the things we can control outside of those variables that can actually help us set us up for that good night's sleep overnight as well. My message to athletes is here, Mitch, as well. If you have a bad night's sleep and you're racing, just bite down on that mouthpiece is the words I would say, and just go for it. You're getting a chance here, just can do it. Don't use it as an excuse.
Hey guys, just a quick pause here as we're really unpacking sleep and how important it is to get that time with the eyelids shut. Well, I thought there's no better time than now to chat about Pillar's triple magnesium. You may have heard me chat about Pillar before on the podcast, a sports micronutrition company developing products that intersect between pharmaceutical intervention and sports supplements for athletes. Now, I've been taking Pillar magnesium, the triple magnesium, 30 minutes before bed each night with the idea that it helps to aid my sleep. Magnesium is a vital micronutrient to support sleep, as it is a cofactor in the hormone synthesis of serotonin, which the brain then transforms into melatonin. We all know what melatonin is. Melatonin is produced in your body when the sun goes down to trigger your body that it is time to go to sleep. Put quite simply, while melatonin isn't necessary to fall asleep, the higher levels you have of melatonin, the better you will sleep. As you're finding out now from Ian how important sleep is to us, and therefore how important it is to have good sleep hygiene, that's where Pillar's triple magnesium slots right in. Guys, you've got to try this for yourself. I keep banging on about it, but seriously, this one does work. Head across to pillarperformance.shop and use the code LITP for 15% off your first order. Or our USA listeners, head across to thefeed.com/pillar. Check it out, guys. That's pillarperformance.shop. Now, let's get back to this episode. Look, I'm very much not needing to do peak performance anymore. So I'm very much living on what you just said. Look, I've got to just push through today. It's not going to matter if I'm functioning at 100% or 90 or 80. I can still get it done. I don't need to follow the world tour anymore. My question out of all that is, and I'm sure a lot of people are probably listening to this and going, yeah, I can push through. I can make it happen. What are the long-term effects of lack of sleep then? Because people can just keep pushing it and keep going, cool, I can get it done. 5 hours tonight. I've got to get this project done. I've got to get up at 4, 6 hours tomorrow, yada, yada. It goes on and on and on. When is too much? When is that time where you're going to go, all right, you need to start prioritizing sleep because you're going to burn out?
Right. So the difference there, Mitch, and I want to come back on this because it's really key. The difference is in the last question that we were talking about competition or race, which doesn't happen every day or every week.
Yep.
Right? Now, if people are racing every week, then we have to have a bit of a long-term look at what's going on. But I'm talking about someone maybe potentially racing once a month, right? Or once every 2 months. When we're talking about non-race periods, training, adaptation, we don't want to induce that sleep loss. That's not what we want to do. We don't want to have that whatsoever. So we don't want people to be kind of biting down their mouthpiece on a training day. So they wake up on a Thursday morning, they've only had 5 hours sleep, and they've only had 5 hours sleep every night this week, because I'm sure many of your listeners have full-time jobs, have kids, to maybe racing amateur or recreationally, trying to beat their friends on a Saturday, whatever it might be. You can't, and this is about the balance as well, you can't have that level of sleep loss. So you need to make some fundamental changes then to your schedule. So then you would need to step back and look and see how much time you're allowing for sleep. Unfortunately, many middle-aged athletes, male and females alike, tend to just use sleep as a passive exercise at the end of the day. I've gone to work, I've done something with the kids, I've done my training, I've had dinner, I've watched a show. Okay, now I'll get into bed. Oh, what time do I have to get up in the morning? Oh, 5 o'clock, so I have to go for a bike ride before I go to work. Okay, good night. And then people will come to me and go, and this is all athletes, I got something wrong with my sleep. You see, I'm only getting 5 hours of sleep a night. And I'm going, but you go to bed at 11 and you get up at 5. And I'm like, let's count that back. That's a 6-hour window. And they'll go, yeah, but what? I need to get 8. 8 doesn't go into 6. You don't have a sleep issue. You have a mathematical problem here. And for some people, it is actually that simple. And I'm telling you, I've worked with some elite athletes making millions of dollars, and they've had the same problem. They've gone, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. Sometimes it's just about allowing more sleep time. So that's the first thing I would say is that you cannot get adequate sleep and recovery unless you don't allow the adequate amount of time to do it. Like, I'm not that clever, but
even when you
can't get 8 hours and 6.
Even when you just said then, you can't get more than 6 hours of time in bed. It doesn't equate to 6 hours of sleep, does it?
That's right. And that's another good point as well, because we have to allow for what we call sleep onset latency, the time to fall asleep, which can range up to 45, 50 minutes for some people. Some people fall asleep really quickly. Some people take a little bit of time. The other thing as well is across the night, it's normal to wake up a few times. It's an inbuilt mechanism to us. We wake up, protective mechanism. You may experience this when you travel. A lot of people wake up in hotels, unfamiliar sleeping environment, or so on. That's quite normal as well. So to get 8 hours of sleep, I generally say to people, you need to be in bed for at least 9 to get that actual 8 hours of sleep duration. And I think people confuse the two, time in bed versus sleep duration. Time in bed is not always sleep duration. So generally, if someone's in bed for 10 hours, they'll probably generally get about 8 or 9 hours. And so we call that sleep efficiency, 80 to 90% of sleep efficiency. It's basically a utilization metric of the bed. And that's before we even look at quality of sleep as well, which could be related to, one, things inside their control, like I was saying, body weight, alcohol, caffeine, all these other things inside their control, and which will impact the quality of their sleep, what they're doing before sleep as well. So obviously lots of people have heard about electronic devices and the impact on electronic devices. There's lots of variation on that research that's coming out. And so I think what people should do, particularly the people who are working, is don't do any work within an hour to 2 hours before bed, because it may be the type of activity they're doing is stimulating cortisol, which inhibits melatonin, which helps us sleep. And that could be affecting our sleep as well.
Well, that's what you've sort of tapped into it now. I think that all this stuff is called sleep hygiene, isn't it? Sort of the way we prepare for bed, the way we sort of do everything around sleeping, getting ready for bed, the routines, your wearables, I guess, sort of roll into that. All this sort of stuff. Let's chat a little bit about sleep hygiene now, because I think that taps into a little bit what I want to talk about is quality versus quantity. Maybe having 9, 10 hours of sleep a night of low quality is maybe better to have, 7 of high quality. I don't know. Is that correct? Or is that, let's talk about those two subjects and whether they work together or not. I don't know.
So there's no consensus on what the definition of sleep quality is in sleep. There's no consensus. There's a lot of division about what is sleep quality.
Okay. Well, so what's the argument then?
So it's really hard to measure. It's really hard to quantify what it is. There's frameworks and theoretical approaches to it, what it is. So like I've just finished doing some data collection. I'm analyzing some data. We're writing up the papers now. We've been looking at dreams, nightmares, and the impact on death anxiety and anxiety. And so we found a high correlation between sleep quality and basically nightmares. So the people who have lots of nightmares and frequent nightmares have poor sleep quality. But when you look at the studies around people who have nightmares, when they have a nightmare in a laboratory setting, there's actually no change to their sleep. So their sleep architecture, so the time in REM, deep sleep, and so on that we spoke about earlier on, doesn't change. So now it becomes a subjective felt experience the next day. I feel like my sleep was bad, even though objectively it was really good. And there was no problem with their sleep on a night of a nightmare compared to a night of no nightmare. But now they're saying my quality of sleep was really bad. So because of the content of the dream. Some people will say that their sleep quality is really bad because of maybe airflow, noise, partner snoring, whatever it might be. So sleep quality is very difficult for us to, basically give it a numerical number. Now, many people are listening to this going, but I have a device that says my sleep quality was 92. That's completely made up, right? That's an algorithm from that device that's probably looking at the consistency of your sleep, the time you go to sleep, your age. It's probably looking at a few variables there. It is made up, but it's probably just looking at some kind of general, data points from the research behind it, but it's not a true measure of sleep quality. And so National Sleep Foundation in America says that basically, if you can kind of fall asleep in a certain time between maybe 10 and 40 minutes, you get about 7-9 hours of sleep a night, you feel pretty good the next day. These are all the things that would indicate sleep quality as well. It's very hard to get sleep quality. But come back to your point about the timing of sleep or the duration of sleep versus the quality. We see people in society going, I only need 4 or 5 hours sleep a night and I perform quite good. I would say that probably 99% of the people that I have seen that get 6 hours or 5 hours sleep a night generally are overweight. They're not very healthy. And I don't think they're the sharpest tools in the cabinet either, because They have a lot of brain fog during the day. They're relying on a lot of caffeine, a lot of sugar, all these stimulants. When someone says they can get by on 6 hours sleep and it's got no effect on them, I want to see somebody that's not pre-diabetic, someone that's reaction time is on point and can probably, run a 10K in under 40 minutes. That's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at someone that says they can get by in less than 6 hours sleep and function. And there's less than 1% of the population that can do that.
Yeah, and for how long? Look, I think I'm falling into that category sort of in this last sort of couple of months. Stuff's need to get done. I'm watching more what I'm doing, and it's around 5.5 to 6.5 hours a night. Yet stuff's getting done. Don't necessarily think I feel better as a person. I still feel like I can do what I need to do. But how long? That's the thing in the back of my mind. How long can I keep pushing this boat out like that? It doesn't. That's what I'm sort of feeling. Is like I feel like I'm tapping into something I don't need to.
Yeah, I think it's going to be dependent on individuals as well, Mitch. If someone's really fit and healthy and young, they'll probably get away with it for longer. I started my career out in the military, wasn't really focused on sleep in an infantry unit. I'll be honest as well, we partied a lot and went out, and you come home at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you can go and run 10Ks, then the next morning it's easy. If I did that now, I'd be in hospital, I have to call an ambulance. I'll be on a drip for a month. That's even without the drink. It's just staying awake.
Yeah.
It gets harder as you get older. But I think there's so many factors in it. I wouldn't recommend it long term. I think once what's really interesting is that the people who do that, once they go past about 10 days, some of those people become pre-diabetic. And for the people who may not be as active as yourself, some of those people gain up to 5 kilos in like 2 to 3 weeks. And we know in the shift working community, so if anybody is listening to this and does shift work as well, in this scenario I do a lot of research in as well and do a lot of work in shift work, especially in mining and fly in, fly out and drive out. We see people generally in the first year of shift work, independent of the calories that they consume, gain between 5 and 10 kilos in a year because their whole kind of leptin and ghrelin system around nutrition and sleep is completely discombobulated. They're all over the shop as well. So my recommendation is that if you've got to go through a short period of sleep where it's only 5 or 6 hours and you're not feeling great, don't do it for more than 10 days in a row because you will start getting some negative effects. We see that long term, that lots of sleep disruption, particularly from shift work, i.e. people doing night shift permanently, is linked, the odds ratios are linked there to cancer, prostate cancer in men and breast cancer in females. But there is no positive impact that comes out of sleep loss long term. Now, the problem is, as well as I think what we're seeing amongst a lot of middle-aged men, and I'm putting myself square in this bracket here, in your 40s and you're kind of, you're losing it, but you don't want to lose it. You're not as strong as you were once, but you still want to be a little bit tough. And I think what we're seeing here is a lot of people here now starting to sacrifice sleep for this kind of toughness element. We see all this stuff on social media about getting up early, rise and grind, the 4 a.m. club, the 5 a.m. club, crush the day, get this extra hour of sleep. I would say that 95% of those people, when they ask me about it, are like, but then I'm wrecked by 1 o'clock.
Totally.
Don't fall for this like media hype and bullshit online. I'm not sure about those people online that are doing that, but maybe they can go back and have a nap during the day. Maybe you've got a 9-hour, 10-hour job during the day. You're an executive or a manager or a shift worker. You can't go and have a nap. Maybe you've got 4 kids. Maybe you've got all these other things that are happening that's not controllable within your life. So don't fall for this kind of, crap that you see online. And the other thing as well is I think it's really important to understand your chronotype. So chronotype meaning your time type. You got owls and larks. So the owls are like teenagers. They want to go to bed late and get up late. They're not doing it because they want to piss you off. They're doing it because that's the way they're designed.
Yep.
Other people like to get up early and go to bed early. So young kids. And generally as adults, we're going to see a distribution across society of this. And many people listening to this will be the same. They might hate getting out and riding a bike early in the morning. They're not very much an owl chronotype. Or those people don't really get into cycling because they don't like to get up early. So maybe they go to a different sport because of it. And maybe there's more predominantly larks who do like things like swimming or bike riding because the culture is about getting up and going cycling early in the morning. So we have to understand our time type as well. And we're not all the same. And I think, unfortunately, in this area of biohacking, which I really despise that term because there is no such thing as biohacking, I don't think. I think it should be called optimization. So in these areas of optimization, we have to understand that not everybody is the same. And this is the problem. People going around, screaming like, do the carnivore diet, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, lift weights, do yoga, do jiu-jitsu, do kickboxing, do cycling, do triathlon. It's like, what? Wait now, just stop. I know you want me to meditate as well, like and be zen, and do an MBA on the weekend, and volunteer to local charity. Like what's going on? Like people are out of their mind trying to do stuff. People just need to look at the workload and reduce some stuff, and then this will free them up to have a little bit of extra sleep. Like we're steadily declining. There's been many reports here in Australia by Deloitte Access Economics and the Sleep Health Foundation looking at the issue around sleep. And our sleep is declining in this country over the last 14, 15 years. And it's come up with negative health impacts, Mitchell, apart from performance. We're seeing more people with metabolic conditions, diabetes. We're seeing cardiovascular disease on the increase as well. We're seeing all of these things increase. So we're getting low sleep. We're getting heavier and fatter. We're getting sicker. We think we're getting more done and we're not. And here's the other one as well. This is another area I'm interested in, is around death. Do you know that people will turn around and say to you, oh yeah, but we're living longer. Medicine is better. We are living longer than we ever have before. That's not true. The death rate has gone back in the US. So people are actually dying younger.
Wow.
It is stagnant in the UK and it's stagnant in Australia as well. The next thing out of people's mouths is, oh, that's because of COVID. No, that data is pre-COVID.
Wow.
So we are not getting away with it. We are not hacking anything. We are actually fucking ourselves up, for want of a better word. And I don't know why people do this. We need to get some balance. Now, I'm just as bad as anybody else. I do long distance swimming. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I've been doing free diving. I've always got 2 or 3 things on the go. I used to run like mountain ultra marathons as well. I know what it's like. It's tough, but sometimes something's just got to go. You can't do everything. It is difficult.
Do you think that one of these elements, and I think a lot of us, we look to sport for something to follow, for enjoyment, for inspiration, all types of sport. You look at these athletes, like you said, you look at them on social media, but you also just see them on TV and you aspire to be athletes. Let's talk about pro cycling now. This biohacking, that's in pro sport. We're looking for the 1%ers. We're looking for, compression boots and, the next supplement that can help us there for, 0.25% here. How do we hack into our sleep? So I feel like that busy lifestyle that you're talking about in a general, the general public is also in professional sport. These athletes are doing a million things to find the 1% rather than worrying about the 95%, the training and the recovery and the nutrition, right? What's your opinion about when it comes to professional sport? What's the change there? Is it sort of what I'm saying? Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, it's just as bad. I think professional sports, athletes, coaches, they're just as bad. They're looking for these hacks as well. And I think I'm thinking about Shona Halson's work from the AIS, who I've done some research with as well. And Shona is now at ACU. And Shona does a lot of stuff in the recovery space and sleep as well. And she put out this brilliant pyramid a few years ago about the hierarchy of recovery. And it's so true. And I go one more on this. Compression boots, cryotherapy, sauna, binaural beats, all this sort of stuff. People want to hand over money. They want to outsource their recovery. Massage, physio. Yeah, I paid for recovery. Sleep is free and nobody will do it. People are still banging on about sleep and going, but they won't do the basics about allowing enough time. We'll come back to what we spoke about earlier on. And that's free. Maybe what we should do, Mitch, is we should start charging people to go to sleep. And then people might actually start doing it. Well, because I think people need to focus on the fundamentals, even without the device.
That's what the devices are doing. I think now people are taking more emphasis on sleep because they've got something to track it, because they can paying for something that tracks their sleep all of a sudden. Now it's become more important.
But you know what's interesting about that, Mitchell? Since the increase of sleep trackers, sleep has not increased as a society.
Right.
That's what's interesting. So the big data shows that it's actually not increased.
Right.
So and how many people out there, and I know some people are listening to this going to start giggling, going, this guy's an idiot, which I am. But how many people is going to sit there and go, oh, maybe he's right because I did buy a Fitbit and now it's in the drawer. And then they look in their drawer and they might have an Oura ring in there. They might have a Fitbit and a Whoop. And they're like, oh yeah, I got that for Christmas, my birthday. But people don't use them constantly and they don't use them to make these improvements. It's like any behavioral change, isn't it? It's like it's hard to do and it's difficult. And I'm not saying this is easy. Well, it is easy, but it's hard to do because we've got lives and so many competing priorities. And even the professional bracket, Mitchell, it's the very same as well. Professional athletes struggle with this as well because they've got the added issues on top of this of travel, jet lag, time of performance, media. Then you get into combat sports and contact sports. We got weight cutting, sponsorship. That becomes difficult as well. So these guys have got a different set of variables, but it can be just as onerous on them as well.
Do you think it's easier for them to quantify, for instance, let's talk about pro cycling again now. You come in from a stage, you go and see a massage therapist, you might go and see your chiropractor, your physio as well. You have dinner probably at, 11 o'clock at night, get ready for the next stage, and then try and get some sleep, try and get good sleep, force good sleep in. I'm hearing like a whole lot of stuff that you can go the next day if you have a bad day. Hey, look, I did my massage. I saw my chiro. I had the meal. I did all the things that you asked me to do. It's not my fault now. Whereas if you go, look, I'm not going to do any of that stuff because I'm going to prioritize sleep, suddenly you might get a bit of kickback. Hey, you didn't have any of that special therapy that we're offering you. You just went and had a sleep. You can see that sort of conundrum there. Actually, what you're saying is sleep sort of out trumps all this stuff. Yet in society now, or even in pro teams, if you're not using all the extra minutia facilities that they're offering, you're sort of like, well, I can see where athletes are getting a bit caught out.
Oh, I do as well. And it's hard. And I think there's so much competing interest as well. And also as well, some of these sporting teams have got like sponsorship issues where they have to use certain things or they have to promote certain products or whatever it might be. So that can be difficult as well. I think all these things is going to be a balance. I'm not saying that massage and cryotherapy and all these other things don't have a place to do, but if an athlete is sitting around for 2 hours to get his massage and his dinner before he can go to sleep, that's substituting the actual sleep time, and maybe they're better off going to sleep and missing out on the 10-minute leg rub down that they're going to have before sleep. So it's about a balance and what's actually going to help them overall. And this is the key as well. And I think the other thing as well is looking at timing of stuff as well. So are they better off having that massage, within 20 minutes of finishing the race? Are they better off having it the next morning before the start? Should I have a meal a bit earlier? Because we know that meal impacts the timing of sleep as well. We see a lot of people not being able to sleep after meals. And particularly for, I think, people who are doing stage racing probably understand this better than anybody, trying to get a lot of calories down from what you've basically burnt off that day for the next day, because obviously nutrition is important for next day recovery. You obviously want to stretch, move around a bit. You're probably talking about race strategy as well. There's a lot of things to do in between. It reminds me a little bit of Formula One as well, when they have like practice and sprint and qualifying and race day. There's a lot of things to do in between. So it can be hard as well. That's where I think before you go into one of those races, you need to focus on what's called sleep optimization. So in other words, allow as much time as you can for sleep before you get there. Be doing all the right things leading into that race, because you're going to go into this period of poor sort of sleep and recovery, or it's going to be more difficult, but then you can kind of recover after. And that's what I was saying more to start, Mitchell, as well. Knowing you're going through this window, that's going to be a little bit kind of like red zone, for want of a better word. But afterwards, you're going to have a chance to get back into the green zone, and then before the next one, get into the green zone as well. But throughout that weekend or that race, you're going to go kind of amber into red. And that's where that's where I use that kind of bite down your mouthpiece and go, because you've just got to do it sometimes. And this is where it can be challenging. But it's looking at the timing of what's happening in between those races, I think is really key. The other thing I'd say as well is looking at the caffeine timing as well, which I spoke about earlier on, other stimulants as well. And understanding that things like pre-workouts got a lot of caffeine in it as well. So people are taking pre-workout. And the other one that people never think about is chocolate. The darker the chocolate, the more caffeine in it as well. So a lot of people are kind of going, I don't have any coffee after 11 in the morning. And then, after dinner, I have a glass of red wine and I have maybe 4 squares of dark chocolate. Well, the alcohol is going to disrupt your sleep, and then the caffeine is giving you a boost as well. So it's like having an espresso martini, and even those small doses for some people can be enough to fragment or disrupt their sleep. So it can be quite challenging. And I think what I'm trying to do around this sleep stuff is it's very hard for me to give the blueprint for everybody to follow. And we're very used to that now. Oh, do these 4 things and hack your sleep and I'll have optimization.
You'll be good,
What I'm trying to do is give people like the philosophy or the principles around this. And then you got to take those and kind of deploy them in your life and see what works for you. And some may work, some may not. Some people can drink caffeine till 4 p.m. in the evening and have no problem. Other people have to stop at 9 a.m. So everybody's going to be slightly different. Some people can handle a drink in the evening, others can't. So it's playing around with these variables is what's going to impact you. Maybe you need that massage before you go to sleep. Maybe you can fall asleep actually within 5 minutes after the massage. But for other people, maybe the massage stimulates them and keeps them awake for another 2 hours. So it's how do you play around with these variables? And there's no one blueprint for everybody. And that's kind of a key takeaway from this. And I know that frustrates people, but in a world where everything is binary, yes, no, good, bad, support this, don't support that, biology is not like that. Biology is a difficult science because everybody is so different, and we cannot apply a cookie cutter approach to everybody. And that's why some people listen to this might be like, oh, this is why, Doug down the road or Johnny down the road can do this and I can't, because we're actually different.
One last thing I really want to talk to you, and maybe it's not your area of expertise, but it's all got to do with sleep, so I'm sure it is. Something that I think a lot of listeners are going to relate to out there. They've got young kids. I've got my own young kids at the moment, and you're walking in to say goodnight to your kids, or when they've been asleep, go and check on your kids. They sleep so deep. You can lift them from one bed to another. You can give your kid a kiss on the cheek. They do not move. They drop into the deepest possible sleep. Well, my kids do anyway. I'm generalizing. I'm assuming all kids are like this. Once they get to sleep, they're gone. What is this phase with children, and how do they differ to us as we get older? You spoke about the chronotypes or the types of, the way you sleep. Like my kids, they wake up super early. They go to bed early. You try different things to make them sleep longer, but you want them to go to bed earlier. What's happening when we're younger, and why is the different sleep sort of cycles different then?
Lack of a mortgage. It's a good question. And again, you're probably getting a good experience here, Mitch, with your kids being like that. Other people don't have that experience. So it's not ubiquitous, There is a lot of variation in kids' sleep as well, and lots more sleep problems emerging as well. But to talk about how does sleep change across the ages, it does. So obviously as newborns to toddlers to infants, to young kids like primary school age, and there's pre-adolescent and adolescent. It's exactly what you said. They're going to be like a Lark chronotype, get up early and go to bed early when they're very young. Then it's become a teenager to go to bed later and get up later. That's just basically how they're designed and what happens. Kids in general will need a lot more sleep than what we do. So we see even up until the teenage years, 18, 19, 20, kids are going to need up around between 9 to 11 hours of sleep a night for some in a 24-hour period. Why can they sleep so soundly? I would guess that you're, in that respect, maybe, or your example, maybe your kids are quite active. So we see the same principles that we apply for adults. And this might be actually a good time to talk about these. These are some good things that we can do for not only adults and kids. And this may be why kids sleep a little bit better. First of all, we need to get light during the day, natural light. Open up your windows, open up your curtains, get outside and get some light. You need to get that light for at least 20 to 30 minutes across the day. It doesn't have to be first thing in the morning, but it can help. But you want to have 20 to 30 minutes of light. You can combine that maybe with exercise as well. That can be nice as well, particularly if you're doing some outdoor stuff, swimming, running, cycling, and so on. Or maybe even if you've got some weights, maybe go out into the garden and lift them as well. Get a bit of sunshine on yourself. Light is very good because light will synchronize what's called our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is like basically our body clock in the base of our hypothalamus in our brain. And that will synchronize everything. That light during the day will actually help our sleep at night. And kids generally get a lot of that because they're outside playing, or should be. The second thing we can do as well for kids and for adults, I'm going to come back to it, is sleep regularity. I don't know what you might have over there in Victoria or other states, but I know here on TV, they got something like Fat Cat, he goes to bed.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, Fat Cat's going to bed, right? After this, you got to go and we're going to have a shower and going to read you a story, and then we're going to go, put your nightlight on and whatever, play a lullaby, whatever it might be. But
nice routine. Yeah,
routine. What do we do as adults? Oh, the kids are in bed. Right, let's get a drink. Okay, now let's put on that like Haunted House Manor show or whatever it is on Netflix. Okay, right. Now, while that's on, I'm just going to do a few emails here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What? Oh, I just sent you something on Instagram. And this is all going on while the show is gone. So you got the Instagram thing going, you got the show on, you're catching up on some emails, and you're having a glass of red. Oh, Christ, it's 10 o'clock. Let's go to bed. Shut that down. Let's go to bed. Why can't I sleep? Like, if you did it to a kid, they'd be all over the place as well, right?
I'm laughing because it's just so true.
It's so true. It's so true, right? Everybody does it. And so this is the problem. And so you're replacing sleep time with all this activity. The activity is stimulating us as well. So we're doing the same for the kids as well. The next thing is we want consistency of what time we get up as well. So we don't want to be getting up one morning at 4:30, the next morning at 8:30, and so on. The more variation we have at the time we go to sleep and the time we get up in the morning, we call that social jet lag. And so that time at sleep onset variance. So we don't want that variation. And so when kids have that variation in time to go to bed and time to wake up, that's when they start having behavioral problems during the day. They start sleeping more. They start getting very irritable. So the key is to keep that schedule consistent, not only for kids, but for adults as well. So light, consistency of sleep schedule. And then we want to talk about sleep and environment as well. So we want to have that sleep environment dark and cool and comfortable. We don't want that as a second office, a storage facility, and so on. We want that to be a place, a refuge where we go for sleep. Now, it's going to be a source of contention in the room because women are going to like it really warm and men are going to like it like the Arctic. It's always an issue. So you could look at different strategies around pre-cooling the room or using a fan on your side of the bed. You could also look at potentially having two different duvet covers. So one thick and one thin. You could use like in a bed, you could use like two king single sheets and two duvets as well. So you're sleeping in the same bed, but you have your own bedding. That's another strategy as well. You see that a lot in Scandinavia. This happens. So people can regulate differently as well. And that sleeping environment as well should be free from distraction. So you don't want that to be, another place where there's like a computer going, a TV, loud music, all that sort of stuff as well. And you want that there to be conducive for sleep. So you keep that as your sleeping environment. So we're talking about light, consistency of scheduling, and we talk about the sleeping environment as well. These are some of the key things that people can do, independent of the alcohol and caffeine that we spoke about as well earlier on. And the other thing we know is that physical activity each and every day is not only good for our physical health, but it's good for our mental health, and it's also good for our sleep as well. So people that exercise, 3 to 4 times a week, doing, 45 minutes of aerobic exercise, generally going to have better sleep. And I'm sure a lot of your audience will experience this as well. So all these things can actually help.
One thing that my wife loves is sort of that ambient white noise, and she puts it on and she thinks it helps with the kids. It blocks out that sort of, if we're cluttering around, cleaning dishes up, our youngest is asleep in the room, she's not going to hear us because she's got this ambient white noise on. It's filtered back into our room now, and now we've got the ambient white noise on. I don't love it. But I've got used to it. What's the effects of that noise? Is that something positive? Do you want that noise in the background? And then you become dependent on it.
Personal preference. Like some people, like I love listening to like a podcast or the radio as I go to sleep. And I developed that habit as a young kid, like maybe probably 11 or 12. My dad used to come into my bedroom and go, "You're like an old man." I used to listen to talkback radio when I was 11 at nighttime. I just loved the kind of the chat, kind of nighttime radio chat, like, "And now here comes John ringing in from Bendigo." "Yes, John. Yes. Yes. Well, that's very interesting that the cow ran through your field." Like I don't know why. And I think it's just the tempo or the cadence of it. I just really liked it. It wasn't so much the content. And the same with podcasts as well. I'd put on like a philosophy or a British history thing, and I'll have like, someone, posh talking away. And that seems to help me. But you put on maybe like what they call green noise, which is like, noise from the environment, like birds chirping and all
rain and falling and all that stuff.
That drives me mad. Like, so like, it just depends what works for you. So there's no solution. Other people love it. People like listening to stories. There's on Spotify, and there's Calm apps and all these things as well, where they have like people telling stories. Some people love that. So my message there is, Mitchell, is that whatever works for you, whatever's not agitating you. So maybe the white noise is agitating you, that's not good. But if it's not agitating you, you can fall asleep. It's all good, yeah, whatever works for you. There's no conclusive studies on that either. It's an interesting study I would like to run about looking at the difference on podcasts, because, podcasts or radio or the content, because there's some stuff I can't even listen to during the day, so I couldn't listen to it at nighttime,
What about light? You spoke about light before, and I know when I was racing, we'd be in the hotel rooms and you've got sort of red lights everywhere. There's one on the TV, there's one smoke alarm up there, then there's one over here. So we'd take some tape with us and we'd tape all the lights up in the room. Ultimately, once your eyes are closed, why would that light affect you? I think for me, it became psychological. Oh, the bloody red light, I'm sure I can see it. Is that true? How much effect does the light have?
So Sean Kane's and some of this work at Monash University. Sean's probably the leading expert in this area around light. So I know that one, it's a distraction. You can focus on it because it drives me crazy as well. I'm always plugging out stuff in hotel rooms. I've read some research around that, and I could be wrong, but I believe that light still can affect people because it can be absorbed through the eyelid into the eyeball in a simplistic form. For some people, they're that light sensitive. And to work out your light sensitivity, a good one would be in the evening is, can you handle like ceiling lights being on in a room? Or when you go out during the day, do you need sunglasses or not? I'm very light sensitive, extremely light sensitive. I always need sunglasses, winter and summer when I'm outside. My wife is the opposite way around. So people have different light sensitivities as well. So for some people, it can be more the psychological thing. For other people, I think it actually impacts the timing of that, the stimulation of that SCN, and really affects them. Yeah. So I did read a study years ago talking about red light impacting people being asleep. And there was some other stuff as well. I don't know how good it was around even red light being absorbed onto your skin. So I'd have to come back and have a look at that. There was one, I don't know if it was a study or somebody on a podcast doing biohacking was talking about it. I'm not really sure. I'd have to check that one. It's a good question. But independent of that, if it's annoying you and causing you frustration, you're doing the right thing there, Mitchell, is tape over them as well. So if you can unplug them or tape over them, because I do the same thing as well, especially those ones that flash. Oh, they drive me insane. Absolutely insane. Yeah. So I always bring an eye pillow with me as well. It's like a little yoga pillow, like a heavy pillow. I like that little bit of pressure on my eyes. But I also bring like an eye mask as well every time I travel, just in case, and some tape if I can't tape over. But those ones that flash, the smoke alarms, they drive me insane.
When it comes to us, does sleep promote sleep? If you get good sleep, good consistent sleep, that routine, are you going to sleep better? Or is it better to grind yourself to the ground, make yourself super tired, and then you're going to have like a 24-hour sleep that night?
The answer is no, I don't do that.
I'm just thinking myself, and when I was racing, and you'd be in a grand tour, so 21 days in a row, and actually the more tired I got, the worse I slept. Towards the end of the grand tour, I was having the worst sleeps. So I was sort of in that theory, and I'm watching our kids, and I'm thinking, maybe sleep does promote sleep. You know, maybe when I'm not over the limit tired, you know, I think we've always got this theory. Well, I always had this theory. Oh, I'm so tired. I've killed myself today. I'm going to have the best sleep tonight. But actually, it wasn't the case.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're dead right. Yeah. It's not always going to be the best case. And you're going to, if you keep doing that over time, like I said, it's okay every now and then to do it for a race or an event or whatever it might be, every now and then. But if you constantly keep doing that, you're just going to have negative impacts to your health and long-term performance. So it's not recommended to do that. You know, the biohack here, if people want the biohack, is that routine is key here. It's boring, but effective. And it's going to set you up for having good performance. So if there was one biohack I'd say for people to take away from this conversation today, is routine around your sleep. And that's what you need, is routine, consistency, quality, regularity.
All right, Lord Dog, let's talk Whoop or devices, sleep devices. Mate, I know that you had a Whoop from way back in the beginning, or maybe you had an Oura Ring before that. I don't know. You're a guy that I always used to see in the Peloton who was monitoring their sleep. Now everyone's sort of doing that, but I think you were before the curve, before everyone was using it. Tell me a little bit about your experience using Whoop and, you know, more sleep devices, and how long you sort of been working with them or using it.
Yeah, for me, it all started 2017. I was kind of going through this hellacious year of overtraining, to make it simple, just severe overtraining. At the time, there's really not much out there to be able to track recovery and sleep and whatnot. And yeah, we were teammates at the time on EF. We had a team doctor, Kevin Sprouse. I just saw him wearing a band at some point in some race, and I'm dealing with all the stuff. I asked him all these questions about it and kind of walked away. I was like, man, that sounds like something I feel like I could really benefit at this point. Eventually got set up with them. They were almost brand new at the time, and immediately just kind of realized like, okay, this is, as an athlete, this is another very crucial part of the puzzle that we try to put together to be at our best. I'd already been like some talk on sleep and whatnot, but having something to actually track it, having like a monetary, having an actual number to label and put on it didn't exist. And so that was a big draw for me. And yeah, it just kicked off from there. You start using it, you have a lot of eye-opening experiences with, you know, how your body reacts to different things, and also just how your body goes through the whole sleep process. So it's been interesting to see over the last couple of years. It's completely exploded, more than I think I really ever expected. But it's been really cool to see. And yeah, I'm thinking now we're starting to see people across the world. It's not only athletes that are realizing they need to pay close attention to their health.
So in the early years, 2017, when you were having those problems and you reached out and then went looking for different things to try and fix what was going on, whether it was training, whether it was sleep, whatever, and one of them happened to be the Whoop sleep device that you were talking about, what was the response that you found out? Was the information a bit shocking? Were you like, oh, I'm way off the radar here? How much did that actually play a role in getting you back on track?
Yeah, I mean, cyclists, and I think you can probably make the case for most professional athletes, but we always have the idea in our minds that more is better. The harder that we push, the better that we're going to be. And that was my thought process that kind of dug me into a hole, was that I wasn't listening to my body. And, every day I was waking up and I was so pinned, but I'd be like, okay, this means the training's working. This means all the nutrition, all the dieting, and all the, pushing my body to absolute limit. That's going to help me in the long run so much. And so I started just ignoring all these telltale signs that actually, no, I've pushed it too far. Yeah. When I first started using the Whoop, for one, to become addicted to checking every morning and whatnot, But you also start to realize, okay, like, yeah, maybe one day of bad sleep, one day of bad recovery, that's fine. That's what you want. That you want to have that little overreaching aspect of training to get it better. But you start, stacking them up, against each other. You have 2, 3, 5 days of just like really just down in the dumps. Your sleep's all over the place. Then you really just start to realize, okay, this is too much, and having something confirm that, I think, was for me really important at the time. It's pretty incredible, this technology that we have these days. At the end of the day, of course, you have to listen to your body. But for me, it really helped, actually having something to track that really helped me learn how my body operates.
Just thinking about that, and like you pointed out then, I was the same. The first 6 months, you're super interested in it. You're really tracking it, and you're really finding out, okay, if I have 2 beers, it does this. If I train too hard, it does that. Wow, up with the kids all night, that's the effect of that. Oh, that's telling me what happens in training. All that metrics and stuff, that was really interesting for me anyway, the first 6 months and loosely the first 12 months. Look, after that, I sort of felt like I knew what my body did. What's sort of the relevance, beyond that? Because, you've been using it for at least, 7 years now.
Yeah,
how often do you still using these metrics, and what metrics are sort of interesting for you and other athletes, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, now it's just this piece of the puzzle, and the more you use it, the more you kind of become aware of what it represents and what it can tell you. At this point, I've used it for so long that, and being able to align with how I'm feeling to actually what the data is showing. I've been able to actually, like I said earlier, just learn more about my body. So I can almost wake up in the morning these days and be like, oh, okay, that's going to be a good recovery. That's a bad recovery. But the biggest things about this stuff is just, the eye-opener realizations about how everything affects your sleep and recovery. I realized a lot at the beginning, the biggest things, obviously, as much as we hate to admit, is booze. You have a couple beers and how much that actually affects you. And it's been said many times before, and it'll be said many times again, but how much that actually disrupts your sleep. You start to see this, you see the disruptions. But you also see the stuff that actually helps you. Having the room a perfect temperature. For me, the biggest thing was getting good sleep consistency. So shutting it down at the same time every night. Waking up at the same time every morning. Letting your body get into that rhythm. That was a big thing that you don't really think about. A lot of times you get to the end of the day, I'll just go to bed when I'm tired. But once you get your body on that schedule, I think that was big for me. Yeah, sleeping in a comfortable environment. Just stuff like that. It's all stuff that you start to realize that, okay, maybe after 6 months or a year, you kind of have an idea of what works and what doesn't work, but it still has a lot of benefits, going in the future of still continuing to use it and still monitoring. Cause, like everything, we're also evolving as people, all of a sudden, since I've started using it, and I'm probably since I've added kids to the element. So you start to realize, okay, that's a couple of days of bad sleep. I'm going to actually have to, put some more sleep. Comes from naps or going to bed at different times, So yeah, it's I don't know. It's very interesting.
Let's take life on the road. You pointed out a really good point there, and keeping that consistency and even the comfortable environment, 2 things that can be out of your control when you're out racing or even on training camps or traveling with the team. Something that you've done and a lot of pro athletes do their whole career, and they've got to learn to perform at their best like that. So how have you been able to sort of, I guess, control the uncontrollable environment to get closer to what you like for good sleep and good recovery?
Yeah, I mein, like here on Janko Lula, we have I think a big benefit is we have our mattress, stuff like that. We have a mattress sponsor and pillow sponsor. So traveling around with your own pillow, with your own mattress, something that feels the same every night. I think that's really big. But since one thing that we good thing from having kids is that we started giving our kids sound machines every night, and then all of a sudden we became addicted to them as well. So ever since having kids, all of a sudden I had to sleep with a sound machine. But you realize stuff like that white noise or whatever really helps. So it's always tough, and you're so many times on the road, and I'm sure we've all experienced in the Peloton. You get to halfway through a grand tour and you just can't even sleep anymore. You're probably racing in the heat or whatever. There's no air conditioning or anything. You're just sitting in these stuffy rooms trying to take cold showers to cool your body down. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's something we've seen in the last, I feel like 5 years, how crucial sleep is to performance. It's something that'll continue to evolve over the next 5 years. I think being able to track it is definitely been the first step to helping figure it out. I don't know. We'll see.
In saying that, and you're pointing out how important it really is, maybe it's yourself, maybe it's the teams. How much emphasis are they putting on that? It sounds like you're putting a lot of emphasis on it. How far does that really go? Are you going to the extent of going, you know what, like you said on a grand tour, the schedule's getting so busy, I'm getting back at 8 o'clock, I've still got to have dinner, I still got to get back, try and, speak to my missus, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go for a massage because I value sleep more than getting a massage. Where does it sit in your, I guess, hierarchy when you're on a grand tour and when you're on a race? And also, where's the team putting the emphasis on sleep? Are they making it? You pointed out with the team, Jayco, where they've gone, cool, let's get a mattress, let's get a pillow. But are they also doing other things around that, or other teams? Are you guys ahead of the curve?
I don't know if we're ahead of the curve, but I think we're right there on the curve. There's always going to be some new kind of, technology or device that comes out, portable air conditioning units that I think will help. But I think it's down to the rider, because it also is very particular on the person. Some riders like to stay up late and sleep in the mornings, like I'm sure us with kids, we like to kind of shut it down a bit earlier so we can wake up a bit earlier in the morning. But I think we'll see a lot of changes in the next couple of years. I think something sweet would be some kind of device, like something that can make you feel more at home environment. I think was something that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw in the next couple of years. Somehow like getting the same, something simple as getting the same scent in the room, something like that, that you kind of associate with home, associate with sleep. I remember rooming with you. You would always get in the room and you like the, was it Parlo? Yeah, for like stuff like that.
The Palo Santo.
Yeah, like a nice little smoky scent or something, just to help you relax a little bit, But I think I don't know if that's why you did it, but I mean, you probably just got sick of like smelling.
Well, the reason why I did it was actually Taylor Finney introduced me to that, and I think he was meditating to it, and it is a meditative scent piece of wood from Mexico that they meditate to. But I thought, you know what, this is quite cool because it exactly like the mattress, whatever hotel room I'm in, wherever I used to light it at home, it was a familiar smell. It was the same scent wherever I went, which I liked. So it wasn't a scent that I had from my house, but I introduced it and just tried to keep it common. I thought that was not a bad idea.
I think stuff like that, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's running rampant in the Peloton now, but I think it just shows you how particular it is actually to the rider and to the person. Something like, I remember rooming with you and I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was awesome. But I think we're starting to see it's incredible how many people are starting to become attuned to it. But it's kind of an eye opener to 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We'd all just be staring at our phones. We'd have the TV on until we fall asleep, like how bad that is, the level of the Peloton is incredible right now. It's bigger, faster, more exciting, whatever than it ever has been before. And it's all been these different parts of the puzzle that have, attributed that, it's like all the equipment, of course, is faster, but it's also the nutrition and the training and sleep is now definitely a huge part of that we're realizing.
Lastly, Lord Og, one thing I sort of got to the point with sleep devices and all the stuff you're sort of talking about is there's a point I felt for me anyway, there was a tipping point where it became a negative and I was worrying too much about everything else rather than the 99%. So where with sleep devices specifically, looking at the sleep score in the morning or the recovery score in the morning before I'd hit a stage, being at stage 15 of a grand tour and waking up and discovering you should be having a rest day right now. Your recovery is, 3%. And you're thinking, well, I'm going to have a really shit day
How
here.
Are you alive?
But what can you do about it? You've got to go out and race. Yeah. So psychologically, it set you up for a bad day. Do you think that is an effect? Do you think it's better to not know that stuff? Because it can be, it's great in a controlled environment, training camp, but when you're on a race, how does that affect you and other athletes?
No, it's a very good point, like how many times do you wake up and, at some point in a stage race or a grand tour and you know you're pinned. You know your body's just like, it's just not going to do it today. You know, of course you're going to open up the app and be like, okay, yeah, there's just confirmation that I'm going to be on a shocker today. But I think it's also, you know, maybe for some guys they can take that as a kiss of death and be like, you know, it could ruin the race. But I think for me personally, it's been like, this is just confirmation that I need to take it easier today. There's no going for the break. There's no, you know, obviously I'm going to do my job to the best ability, but today is a day that I truly need to, you know, somehow recover as much as I can. So it's kind of it's a fine balance you got to walk on. But yeah, and some guys they can't deal with they can't handle the information, and it's also okay just to you know, shut the app down, you know, log it all, but don't look at it. For me personally, I enjoy looking at the stats, seeing it every day, and yeah, you know, because if you see the bad days and you think you're gonna have a bad day, you know, you could also have the flip side where you say, okay, I'm stage 17, I'm 85% recovered, I'm in the green, or whatever it is, ready score is skyrocketing. You know, no one else is going to be feeling like that, or not as many guys are feeling like that. So I'm going to be on one today.
Maybe the team should start tapping into the apps and start tweaking the sleep scores just to play with their minds.
Oh man,
it's not a bad idea,
like
is
that.
it?
Yeah, that's all a mental game.
So just lastly, do you think, how many can you predict are using sleep devices in the Peloton? Would you say 80% guys have got these, you know, whoops or, you know, Aura rings going on, or is it less than that? How many guys are really tracking their sleep and being professional about it?
Oh, man, I would be inclined to say that probably 95% of the Peloton at least has an account.
Wow.
At least has an account with one of these things. Whether they use it now or continue to use it, but I would say you're close. I would say anywhere 60 to 70% are using it on a daily basis. So, but I would say that everyone's giving it a shot. So.
Well, what did you think? I hope you learned something. I know you did, because I learned a lot. And how funny is Ian? I love chatting to him. He's such a good guy. And he kept pointing out things, and I'm like, mate, have you been sitting in my house just watching what I do? That is exactly what happens. Really, really fun podcast. And of course, Law Dog at the end. I love chatting to him to put it all back into context when it comes to professional sport. Big thanks goes out to our major partner, MAAP, of course, Red Bricks Media, who put this together. You guys, of course, for listening, and the Life in the Peloton team. If you haven't already got yourself a Life in the Peloton book, or if this is the first time you're hearing about it, get across to maap.cc and grab yourself one of those, because you are not going to regret it. That's a lot of fun, something that I've been doing for the last 3 years with a good friend of mine, Tom Southam. Guys, and until next week, stay tuned. I'll love to hear from you, so send in your emails. I'll have another episode for you then. Next week is top 6, Talking Luft's top 6 of the Tour de France. Until then, cheers.
That iconic music in this episode was composed by none other than the legend, Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.